Here with Steve Nicholson in a pasture paddock. Steve, I might just get you to give a quick overview of the history of when we sowed this and what we've got in the paddock. We're looking at this paddock from a production point of view. You can see sheep all around us and so on. It's been a highly productive pasture paddock. But in this context, we're looking at how you might set up a pasture paddock for carbon sequestration and what species mix actually goes towards the maximisation of getting carbon out of the air into the ground. Steve, can you give us just a background on what's been sown here?
Yes, not a problem, Guy. So this is a multi-species perennial pasture. We picked this paddock because it happened to be the worst paddock on the farm. We had a lot of problems here with soil structure, sedicity. It just didn't perform. It didn't matter what, needed a lot of help. So we decided we'd put a multi-species pasture into it to get productivity, but also to improve it. So we looked at a range of things, and at the moment this was sown in 2018-19 during the drought, and it had a mixture of cocksfoot, phalaris, subclover, lucerne, plantain and chicory. The plantain and the chicory we were using as primer crops to punch down and get the whole thing going and open the soils up a bit and get moisture penetration, and then we expected them to disappear out of the sward almost within 12 or 18 months. There's still chicory and plantain here even today, not very much of it, but it still comes back. But as you can see, if you look down here, you'll see the grasses still in the rows where we sowed them. It's just a sward of clover that'll come up now this winter. There's lucerne still right through it. It's a very, very productive paddock. At the moment, it's about 125 hectares. There's 1,500 merino lambs in here at the moment, and they'll stay in here probably for a month to 6 weeks. They've been in here now a bit over a week. We tend to manage our pastures on the basis of ground cover. So it doesn't really matter how long they stay here as long as we keep our ground cover up in that 90% or above.
Yep. We
don't want to see anything less than that, and we're particularly careful about when we do so, put the stock on with the lucerne so that we maximise its longevity. But it's highly productive. It constantly is green. Even before this last rain, there was feed in here, it was green. We had cattle in here a month or so ago. It just works, and because it's got so many different species, you've got all the things that you need. You've got big fibrous root systems that are constantly rejuvenating themselves and growing. You've got the big tap-rooted plants, which chicory was to start with, and now the lucerne's established. On top of that, you've got the grasses with their big fibrous root systems. All this thing power carbon into the soil, and we believe when this finally comes out of pasture, we'll soil test it again and check it all, but we think it'll turn this paddock completely on its head. It'll be a totally different piece of country when we bring it out back into cropping. As it is now, we thought it would be finished by now, given that it's had such a hard life when we first sowed it, but it's as good as it's ever been. It's probably better than it's ever been. It's just a beautiful pasture. It just doesn't want to die.
Setting it up so you've got some summer dominance, some winter dominance as well. It's a gift that keeps giving, in that You've always got something coming for the animals to eat, and it also means there's some green plant growing to capture carbon from the air, and photosynthesis is happening, and that's making the root pump carbon into the soil because it's actively growing with this mixture of summer and winter. So if you have a look on the ground here, Adam, you can see lots of clover coming through. So we're a little bit early in the season yet, but there's
clover here.
There's bigger clover in different places, but it'll be a whole mat of a lot of nitrogen. So to drive carbon into the soil, it's moisture and nitrogen in simple terms. So how much moisture the plants can get access to and how much nitrogen the plants can get access to grow biomass. So free nitrogen from the air with your rhizobium bacteria on your legumes. So there's a really strong legume component in this with your lucerne and your clover mix. And then you want a lot of fibrous root systems to actually punch a hole in the soil, along with your chicories and your plantains with the taproot. So you actually, when it rains, it can capture the moisture. So this paddock there wouldn't be a rainstorm that wouldn't handle it. You know, you could throw a big storm at it and it's just going to suck it up like a sponge. And then there's all the root channels being developed to take that back down into the deeper down into the profile. So you've got that bucket going for you of moisture. So it's always got good moisture conditions because it's capturing all your rain events, and it's got a whole heap of nitrogen driving that vigorous growth. And they're the two components that you really need to drive carbon into the ground. And the beautiful thing is that also drives primary productivity for the livestock enterprise. So, and correctly managing it as Steve has done, so managing it on ground cover, so you've always got that green photosynthetic leaf pumping away, putting carbon into the ground. You never flog it bare into the ground, otherwise you start losing that productivity. So
and
it's a great example.
You lose, if you don't manage these pastures, you end up with no pasture because the stock will tend to eat it down, take the crowns out of the lucerne, so it'll disappear. The grasses get flogged until they lose all their vigour and strength and they disappear, and then the clover will keep coming back, but it'll only then be a very short-term thing. You'll have a bit of clover in the winter, the sheep will flog that down, you'll end up with bare paddock in the summer, and she's all over Red Rover. And it doesn't need to be because...
Well managed. This is 5 years old, and I don't know, it's $100, $120 a hectare or something for seed.
$100 a hectare
and
seed.
Plus the sowing, so it's not a cheap enterprise to start. But over 5 years, you amortise that over 5 years, that's $20 a hectare. Yeah. That's cheap feed.
Cheap feed, and you didn't have to fertilise it, and you don't have to do anything to it. It's actually never been touched since the day it was planted. We haven't sprayed it with anything. We've never sprayed it for burrs. We've never had to do anything to it, except the tiniest bit of spot spraying for the odd Bathurst burr to keep them out. That's it.